Thank you, President Trent. Members of the senior class of 2020, school administration, members of the board, friends and families of the graduates, it is a distinct honor to address you today. As most of you know, I'm retiring in just a few short weeks. As fewer of you know, I've been the only superintendent many of these esteemed graduates have known, so I cannot tell you how honored I am that they have asked me to give their commencement address in my last year as superintendent of Shelby County Schools. For all of my adult life, I've worked with or for teenagers. Today, I'm going to share with you 13 things I've learned from teenagers, including what I've learned from some of you, the class of 2020. My first full-time job began when I was just 3 years older than you. I was 21. I was just out of college. I'd been hired as a group home parent for teenagers in Alaska who had been taken from their homes for a variety of reasons by the state. I was only a handful of years older than they were. What I didn't know then, but came to realize years later, was that during that first job, I began learning from teenagers, and I have not stopped. In the group home, I learned that almost everything kids do, right or wrong, good or bad, can be traced back to an adult decision. Sometimes the adult decision happened years earlier, even before the teen was born. For the kids that I welcomed to the group home, most of those adult decisions had been bad ones. The anger outbursts I saw, the theft habits that got them placed with me in the first place, the drug abuse that caused them to come to our home. All of those things were traceable to adults who had not led them well. But I observed something back then that I've seen over and over across my career. Here's what it is. When kids from our home went to school every day, when they had good teachers and a stable life with us, they thrived. Within months after arriving at our home, I saw kids imitating their teachers or a worker at their home, or sometimes even me. I saw dreams emerge. I saw behavior change. I saw smiles and hope and joy. From the kids at the home, from Flo, Aggie, Stevie, James, Ronald, and Jack, I learned that people are resilient. People are very resilient. A few years after that, I started teaching high school, where my learning continued. I learned from teenagers. Kyle was 15 years old when I had him in class as a freshman, way back in 1991. He was small for his age and quiet, probably because his voice hadn't changed yet when he was a freshman. 5 years later, after I'd moved on to teach at a different school, I was at the mall one weekend when I heard a booming voice say, "Hey, Mr. Neihof." I turned around and looked directly into the chest of a mountainous man, Kyle, grown-up Kyle. Looking up, I said the first words that came to mind, "I hope I was always kind to you." Relief flooded over me when Kyle said yes. From Kyle, I learned that everybody grows up, and I should always be kind. I thought Michael wasn't a morning person. Most mornings, Michael seemed angry. I gave him all the space I could, but some days it was a real problem. Then came that morning in 1993 when Michael told me a story. He came to my classroom as soon as he got off the bus, dragged a chair over to the wall, pulled his hoodie over his head, and went to sleep. When class started, Michael barely stirred. I walked over close to him and whispered a question. His direct and matter-of-fact answer changed my life. Michael said, "Last night my dad and stepmom were drunk. They got in a fight and broke every piece of glass in the house. They passed out around 3 this morning, and I started cleaning up the mess so that when my little sisters got up, they wouldn't see it or step in it. By the time I got it cleaned up, it was time to get on the bus. So if you'll give me 1 hour to sleep, I'll be good for the day. And he pulled his hood back over his head and closed his eyes. That day, I learned the power of listening. I learned that everybody has a story. Ryan seemed to have it all when he graduated. He was smart, he was handsome, and he had a full ride scholarship to the University of Louisville. So imagine my surprise when Ryan came back to see me after his freshman year and told me he had flunked out and lost the scholarship. Looking back, I understand why. Here's what Ryan did not have. He did not have a family member who had gone to college before him. Someone who knew what it was like. Someone who would encourage and push him. But here's what he did have. Ryan had lots of family members and neighbors on the street who told him he didn't need to go to college. I could have kept Ryan in school. Ryan needed me. Still yet today, Ryan needs me. That day I learned that a teacher's responsibility doesn't end at high school graduation. John was a dependable kid. So it was really unlike John to not show up for basketball practice. Later that night, after I got home, John's dad called me. John was a freshman. He was a small freshman. His dad told me that an older kid on the basketball team had been picking on him in school, and he was just done with it. The older kid was a senior, a starter on the team. I was the coach. After hearing what had happened and investigating, I suspended the older kid from the team for 3 days and then allowed the players to vote on whether to bring him back or not. Unknown to me, John and the other young kids were pressured to vote yes. They did so reluctantly, and the older player returned. Within days, that pattern repeated itself. I should have never put that decision on kids. From that experience, I learned that adults are supposed to make adult decisions. Every time Joe came home from college, he came to see me. If it was on a weekend, we often played basketball together. One weekend, while playing basketball, I did something silly. Not bad, just silly. Just trying to be funny, to be one of the guys. Afterwards, Joe said to me, "Don't ever do that in front of me again. I have an image of who you are, and I don't ever want it to change." That day, I learned that someone is always expecting me to be a role model. Brian was dependable. I admired his poise, his quiet strength, his steady commitment to do what he set out to do. He just showed up. He was consistent every day in the classroom, as a football player, as a basketball player. I trusted Brian, but he never reciprocated my trust, not while he was in high school. Years later, Brian came back to me. He unloaded his story. I listened. As an adult, I was able to tell him how much I respected him, how much potential I saw in him. Today, Brian is a teacher. He has 2 master's degrees. Later today, I will text him. He'll text me back. Both of the texts will end with the same 3 words: I love you. From Brian, I learned that trust takes time. Yasmin was always around school. Her mom worked there. She hung out in teachers' classrooms after school. She hung out in the gym during basketball practice. She kept a score clock. She kept a score book. By the time she was a senior, she practically ran the entire school. On a day like today, the day of her graduation, Yasmin stopped the family photo to run to the other end of the gym and find her dad for the picture. It was a moment I'll always treasure. She came for me. Yasmin taught me that parenting isn't always biological. Rosie moved to Kentucky from California as a sophomore. At Shelby County High, she worked hard at everything she did. When her mom was deported, she stepped up for her brothers and sisters. When she couldn't go to college on a scholarship like other classmates, she got a job to pay for it. She lived at home and kept taking care of her siblings. But she went to college too. When she decided to get a master's degree and be a school counselor, she made the sacrifices to make that happen too. She worked during the day and went to school at night. She was a working machine. Rosie taught me that the winners in life are those who outwork everyone else. Cameron Durham is graduating today at Collins. A few months ago, he asked me to introduce him to an influential member of the Frankfurt political world, someone who influences nearly every education law passed in Kentucky. I made the introduction. Cam made the best of it. Because his questions were so good, the conversation lasted twice as long as it was scheduled to last. The lawmaker told him about his own journey from college all the way to his current career. Afterward, I praised Cam, and he shared his strategy for having impactful conversations. He said, "It's about being memorable." I think all of you need to follow Cam's lead. Cam's strategy is to find one moment in a conversation to say or do something so unusual that it's memorable. I learned from Cam how important it is to just be memorable. Lauren Trent is graduating today. Last fall, Lauren contacted me asking if she could be an intern in my office one morning a week. Frankly, in 12 years as a superintendent, I had never before been asked. I was surprised. I was honored. And secretly, I was wondering what she would think of my work. It didn't take long for me to find out what Lauren had to offer. By Christmas time, she was accompanying me to many meetings. I was asking her opinion on a lot of things, and her input impacted my decisions. This year, I learned from your class president, Lauren Trent, that mentoring comes from wisdom, not from age. Rhea Ross is graduating today at Collins. Rhea caught my attention as a dual credit student a couple of years ago when I saw how she was carefully planning for and taking dual credit college classes at JCTC. And also when I saw her getting up early on Saturday mornings and going to the Louisville Black Achievers Club when other kids were sleeping in. A couple of months ago, Rhea shared with me that she had been selected by JCTC administration to receive the African American Student of Excellence Award for the entire school. And by the way, she also told me she would graduate from high school with both a high school diploma and an Associate of Arts degree from JCTC. Yeah, that's right. She's graduating from college today. Rhea's determination, focus, and persistence taught me that success comes to those who plan early, those who make sacrifices and stick with the plan. She taught me that success requires sacrifice. Class of 2020, you come from a big range of experiences. You've had a front row seat to worldwide crisis on 3 different occasions, including the occasion you're experiencing right now, this pandemic. You've also seen our nation and our world rebound from crisis before. The advice I have for you today comes from the teenagers I met before you and from you. Number 1, be resilient. Number 2, be kind to others. Number 3, everybody has a story. Number 4, responsibility is forever. Number 5, make the hard decisions yourself. Number 6, be a role model. Number 7, be trustworthy over the long haul. Number 8, be a parent. Parenting isn't always biological. Number 9, Winners outwork everyone else. Number 10, be memorable. Number 11, mentoring comes from wisdom, not from age. Number 12, success requires sacrifice. But there's one more thing I learned, the 13th thing. I learned it from you in the past 2 months. And I want to thank you for teaching it to me. You see, this month, I too will graduate from Shelby County Public Schools. I'm retiring. It took you 13 years. It took me 29. We're graduating together at what many see as a difficult time in the world. And it is a difficult time. But I'm leaving with the final thing I've learned from teenagers, the thing I've learned from you, the class of 2020. Thing number 13. You, the class of 2020, have taught me one last lesson from teenagers. You see, I've been watching you. I've watched the way you've handled this pandemic. The school closures, the absence of prom, and the absence of all the normal end-of-year events. I've watched you send encouraging videos to each other and post encouragement online. You, Shelby County High School class of 2020, have taught me one last thing of which I'm certain. I can leave the future in your hands. Because of you, I know the 13th thing. Thing 13 isn't a challenge to you. No, it's a fact about you. Here's the final thing I've learned from teenagers, thing 13. Because you're in it, the future is bright. Thank you, seniors. May God richly bless you as you selflessly invest your life in others. The future is bright because of you.